The miracle is in the choice of words used or given to describe the creation. What I mean by that is, the Qur'an, I said before, is the literal word of Allah, meaning every word is divinely chosen. Arabic is unique because for any given word you have dozens of synonyms, dozens and dozens of synonyms, each with a slight difference, very slight difference. So you have, for example, 8 words for falling asleep. And the difference between all of them is, one of them is deep sleep, the other one is almost asleep, but your eyes are open but your mind's sleeping. The other one is you're sleeping but you can hear people. The other one is, and you're sleeping when you're sitting, you're sleeping when you're lying down. Different stages of sleep. A sleep with dreams in it, a sleep without dreams in it. They've got a word for each of them. And I'm giving you a phrase for each of them. Asleep with something, asleep with something. Arabs have a word for each of these types of sleep. Arabs have a word for different types of different ways to describe a farmer. They have a word for farmer when he's planting the seed. They've got a word for farmer when he's taking out the seed. They've got a word for farmer when he's watering the plants. And they're all used for farmer. But they're very specific about words. Very, very specific. And the miracle aspect that's now more recently being talked about is in the precision of the choices of words used to describe things you would almost think in passing. Meaning Allah is talking about something like, the creation of something. And just the way in which He talks about it in and of itself becomes uniquely miraculous. And I put some Arabic here, don't be intimidated. I'll tell you what that is. That's for me, not for you. Some simple examples. One interesting example is Surah Al-Hadid. And by the way, Sheikh Zanadani, who's a famous scholar in the Arab world, collects over 350 scientific phenomena in the Qur'an. But I'm not going to give you 350. I'll give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just point you in the direction when we talk about Qur'an and science, what's it referring to. So this ayah says, وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدِ. Surah Al-Hadid is surah number 57 of the Qur'an. And Allah uses the word, we sent down iron. We sent down iron. Now, the thing of it is, Allah speaks about creating lots of different things in the Qur'an. But for all of them, He uses a verb called khalaqa, or to create. He created the heavens and the earth. He created life and death. He created. But when He speaks of iron, He didn't say He created it. He said, what did I say? He sent it down. He sent it down. And scholars of the past were grappling with this issue. Why? Because, the words of God are very precise. This is our belief. So when someone would argue, when He sent it down, He meant He created it. No, if He meant He created it, He would have said, He created it. He didn't mean that. He meant specifically that He sent it down. Right? And so you find, in the last century, in the 20th century, geologists coming to certain agreements about the beginnings of the earth. One of them being that iron is not part of the original earth. It actually came to the earth in the form of meteors and was buried deep into the core of the earth. Right? So the word used, iron, we sent down iron, becomes a very accurate depiction of the reality of iron because it was sent down. Another example is in Surah Al-Furqan, that's surah number 25. وَجَعَلَ فِيهَا سِرَاجًا وَقَمَرًا مُنِيرًا. Allah speaks of things in the heavens and the earth that are at His disposal. تَبَارَكَ الَّذِي جَعَلَ فِي السَّمَاءِ بُرُوجًا. Blessed is the one who placed in the sky stars. And then He says, وَجَعَلَ فِيهَا سِرَاجًا. And in the sky He placed, particularly for us, a lamp. He calls the sun a lamp in this case, siraj. وَقَمَرًا مُنِيرًا. The words قَمَرًا مُنِيرًا are describing the moon. The word qamar means moon. But the word munir is the one that's really scientific, if you want to take it that way. The word munir means something given light. Something illuminated. Not something that gives off light, but something that is lit up by something else. Like this room is munir. This room is lit up because of the light. But the light itself is siraj. So there's the source of light and the recipient of the light. When He spoke of the sun, He called it a lamp. When He spoke of the moon, He called it a moon that reflects light. So at a time when this is not a known phenomenon, Allah is speaking of the moon as a body in space that doesn't give off its own light, as I mean, nowadays, obviously it's reflecting the sun's light. But, I mean, picture yourself 1,500 years ago saying that. It's not very obvious. Looks like it's giving off its own light. Right? But then it's the direct statement, وَقَمَرًا مُنِيرًا. This third one is a cross between linguistic and scientific. I'll just mention the linguistic aspect of this very quickly because it's not a big deal. At the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the only people surrounding him were people of either idol worshipping people, atheists, Christians, and Jews. The Christians and Jews were the more knowledgeable people. The idol worshippers were not an intellectual people. They were Bedouins in the Arab society. Even the Christians and the Jews at the time believed that the earth was the center of the universe. Okay? And this ayah comes down and says that the beginning of the ayah, this is Surah Yasin, Surah number 36. لَلشَّمْسُ يَنْبَغِي لَهَا أَن تُدْرِكَ الْقَمَرَ وَلَلَّيْلُ سَابِقُ النَّهَارِ. And then this part, وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. The sun does not rebel its orbit that it may come before the moon. Neither does, and so that the day may be coming early, nor does the night come before the day, meaning they've got their appointed times. But in the beginning of the ayah, he's talking about light, the moon and the sun keeping their order, not coming out of their orbits. And then he talks about night and day not transgressing. When it's time for night, it's night. When it's time for day, it's day. And they don't transgress each other. They keep their limits. So far, he's talking about the sun and the moon and the earth and time. Right? But then he says, وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. And all of them meaning the earth, the moon, and the sun. Because these are the three objects mentioned in the ayah. All of them are floating in their own orbits. وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. All of them, falak means orbit, يَسْبَحُونَ to swim or to float. So all of them in their own orbits, they are floating. Now at the time, one belief was, the closer to scientific belief was, the sun is at the center of the universe. And yet Allah is going a step further at this time, 1,500 years ago, and what's He saying? The earth has an orbit, the moon has an orbit, and the sun has an orbit. Right? Way ahead of its time. And this is the theme in scientific phenomena in the Qur'an. It's not talking about something so amazing to you now, but it's something to wonder that how is such an accurate depiction being given of a only lately discovered scientific phenomenon, or scientific phenomena discovered much later to be mentioned in this text. And it's not something, again, this is not something that was boasted or talked about, or as soon as, for example, in Europe, there were other discoveries, Galileo and things like that. These discoveries did not lead Muslim scholars to say, aha, the Qur'an's been saying this all along. Because it was like, oh yeah, we knew that. The book says it already. It wasn't something, a big deal. And I'm saying that because the scientific is only a recent emphasis. We shouldn't go overboard with the scientific thing. I'm just mentioning some phenomena that are commonly talked about, but it's not necessarily something you constantly, push. Then there's of course the famous ayah about the heavens and the earth, which is the Arabic expression for the universe, heavens and the earth. كَانَتَا رَتْقًا. The word ratqan in Arabic means something that is fused and inseparable. Fused and inseparable. The word ratq was used when a mother is carrying a child, because the mother and the child are inseparable. And when she would start delivering, the other word was used, fataqa. Fataqa is the time for her to start parting. Literally her body is parting up and she's parting from her child. So the ayah says the heavens and the earth used to be fused and inseparable, and then we caused them to come apart. Meaning there was the universe in its original form was a fused, united body, some sort of matter, and then it became and spread out, and then the words used later on, it spread out far and wide. So it's close to, very close to, interestingly close to the Big Bang Theory. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the beginning of the heavens and the earth. And of course from the biological perspective there's the description of the embryo. I'm not going to go into that one because it's a nice PhD thesis. It's out from a professor, I think Mustafa Ahmed, who shows the correlation between the linguistic analysis of the ayah, the ayah that talks about the stages of the embryo versus modern science and how that's looked upon. But I'll give you one last one. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ. And we made from water every living thing. The basis of life, water. Again, something stated way ahead of its time. Now I'm going to go to the part that I like to go over. The linguistic miracle of the Qur'an. This is hard for me to explain to people that don't know Arabic, but try to follow along with me. I'll try to make it as easy as I possibly can. This is the third ayah of Surah number 74. Surah number 74, of course, is Surah Al-Muddathir. And it says, وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ, and declare the greatness of your Lord. What's unique about this ayah, the word wa, you notice the shape here and the shape here are the same? Right? For those of you who don't read Arabic, at least you could tell the shapes, right? This is sort of the Arabic symbol for the sentence beginning. In English you have the capital letter that starts off a sentence. In Arabic, among the many usages of the word wa, the letter wa, one of them is that it starts off a new statement. And what I've done here is I've separated the letters. See this shape over here? And that ending shape is similar, it's over there, right? And then this one's got a dot underneath it, and this one's got a dot underneath it, right? And that one's got a dot underneath it, and this one's got a dot. So what I've basically done, in Arabic you merge the letters when you write them, but I've written them here in separated form. For those of you who know Arabic, what letter is this? Go on. What's the first letter? What's the last letter? What's the second letter? What's the last letter? Second last? Third one? Third last one? Find the middle. Declare the greatness of your Lord. Backwards and forwards the same way. Okay? Palindromes. Now, it's fun to make palindromes in any language. Bob, race car, pop, dad. It's fun. Try saying something you want to say in a sentence that is spelled backwards and forwards the same way without having to change what you want to say. Sound possible? At least highly unlikely. Right? Subhanallah. This is one dimension of the miracle of the Arabic language, the linguistics in Qur'an. I'll give you an even more profound example in my opinion. I'm going to come out of the full screen version here because I want to help you understand something easier. Okay, once again, I'm going to try to simplify this as much as I can. Wait, I went too far. Sorry, I ruined it for you. But most of all, okay. Alright. You notice the word wa again, sentence beginning? Kul is kaf and lam, that's separated here. Fi is fa, and this two dot thing is here. Then fa lam kaf, fa lam kaf. I didn't put yasbahun. Let me translate this for you. We just talked about this ayah a second ago. This is the ayah that says they're all floating in their own orbits. Rotating in their own orbits. The word for rotating or floating used is yasbahun. I want you to remember what letter it begins with. Yeah. Okay. So the action, the verb, if I give you the English, all of them are floating or rotating in their own orbits. What's the action? What's the verb? Floating. Okay. When you take the beginning letters and you separate them, kaf in the beginning, kaf at the end. You notice the symbols are the same? Lam in the beginning, second last, lam third last. Fa, fa. And they're all rotating around what letter? Which is the word for rotating. Yasbahun. The letter that begins the word for rotating, they're rotating around it. SubhanAllah. They form a symmetrical pattern. This is a second example. And of course, I'll add one more complication to this. I said to you, produce a sentence of something you want to say. Something you want to say. And try to say it in a way that is spelled backwards and forwards the same way Not to mention, you can't write it down. You can't write it down. And the interesting thing is, this wasn't discovered, and a dozen of these were not discovered until after the Qur'an was published, libraries, many scholars, generations later, scholars said, wait a second. They're doing letter counts of Qur'an, because scholarship was done on Qur'an from every perspective. And they started discovering this. Meaning the Prophet himself didn't claim, hey, look at this ayah, backwards and forwards. He didn't say that. It's something that came much later. And yet it was always there. FaSubhanallah. This one's not 74.3, it's 36. I think 36.30, 36, in the 30s somewhere. So that was an example of palindromes in the Qur'an. I want to give you some easy examples. This is very complicated, but I'm going to, again, try to simplify it as much as I can. The first ayah, I'll read the Arabic. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ. For those of you who read Arabic, let's read this together again. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ. Read the beginning here. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ. The word imlaq is here. What's the word here? Imlaq. But before imlaq, over here, there's a min and there's a khashyata over here. There's a slight difference. And if you look at the ending, nahnu is here and nahnu is here. Narzuqu is here and narzuqu is here. But there's a kum here and there's a hum here. And there's a hum here and there's a kum here. So there's a little bit of a change. But mostly the ayah is the same. These are two different citations from two different surahs in the Qur'an. I'll tell you what they mean. The top one means, don't kill your children because of poverty. We're the ones who provide you all, and not to mention them. I'll say that again. And don't kill your children because of poverty. We are the ones who provide you all, and not to mention them. Let's look at the second one. Don't kill your children out of fear of poverty. We are the ones who provide them and you. Did you hear a difference in the English? You have to pay attention to know. There were two differences. The first one said because of poverty. The second one says out of fear of poverty. The first one says we provide you and them. The second one says we provide them and you. Which to an English listener, even an Arabic listener, same idea. I mean, out of fear of poverty, because of poverty, what's the big deal? It's the same thing. Right? But if you pay a little bit closer attention, this is actually where the linguistic discussion on Qur'an is the most in-depth. In these ayat that are similar, and in translation, even in Arabic, you would hardly notice the difference in meaning. But if you dig a little deeper from the linguistic perspective, you discover something great. And that is, the word min, in classical Arabic, which is because of, I translate it as because of, is used as min ajl, harf ajl it's called. It's a word used to describe a reason. And the implication here is, the ayah is talking to people that are already poor. Because they're killing their children because of poverty, meaning it already exists. If they are already poor, then they are worried about their own food in their stomach first, before even thinking about kids. So when Allah says, don't kill your children because of poverty, who does He provide first? You, because you're poor yourself, and also them. The next ayah says fear of poverty. And fear in any language, particularly in Arabic, is always associated with the future. I'm afraid of losing my job. I'm afraid to get late to work. I'm afraid of failing the class. I'm afraid of a car accident. You're afraid of stuff that hasn't happened yet. The implication directly here is, you're not poor yet. You're not poor yet. Here, what was it? You're already poor. So if you're not poor yet, and you're killing your children, what is it telling you? That we are worried we won't be able to afford them. So when these people are spoken to, what does Allah say? We provide them, not to mention you. For the shallow look, at a shallow look, you and them and you, what's the difference? On just a more subtle, careful look, you will notice the accuracy of the order and how it reflects the meaning that is to be communicated. Two different groups in society are committing the same sin for two different reasons. One reason is outlined here and one reason is outlined here. What takes me 20 minutes to explain to you is just in the change of 2 words. This is divine speech. The accuracy, the subtlety of speech, and how it communicates very, very specific meaning. This is one of my favorite examples. This is for those of you who read the Qur'an a lot. You'll enjoy this one, inshallah. This is also to speak of the profound nature of the imagery in the Qur'an. Imagery in the Qur'an. The Qur'an is very connected, coherent text. One part describing the other. One theme being repeated in different words. Now you notice in this ayah Allah says, I put the translation here, يَعْلَمُ مَا يَلِجُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. He knows what enters into the earth, وَمَا يَخْرُجُ مِنْهَا, and what comes out of it, وَمَا يَنْزِلُ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ, and what comes down from the sky, وَمَا يَعْرُجُ فِيهَا, and what rises to it, وَهُوَ الرَّحِيمُ الْغَفُورُ. And He is the constantly merciful, exceedingly, I missed the word forgiving. Exceedingly forgiving. If you read Qur'an, what do you always read? غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ or رَحِيمٌ غَفُور? You always read Ghafurun Rahim, forgiving, merciful, forgiving, merciful, forgiving, merciful. That's the theme in the Qur'an. Over 70 times you will find an ayah ending Ghafurun Rahim. Inna Allah kana Ghafuran Rahima. Okay? Wallahu Ghafurun Rahim. This is the only place, and again, what Ghafurun Rahim means is forgiving, merciful. This is the only place in the entire Qur'an that says merciful, forgiving. This is the only place. And it's divine speech, right? Every word is, in our belief, is in its place. How come this is the only place that doesn't say forgiving, merciful, rather says merciful, forgiving? Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I'll tell you what one of the great scholars of Islam, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, said about this ayah. He said, every time Allah says forgiving, merciful, at the end of an ayah, at the end of a statement, the beginning of it always has mention of human beings. The beginning of it always talks about in human beings one way or the other. And that's important to note because, as far as human beings are concerned, they need to be forgiven first, then they become deserving of mercy. That's the proper order, as far as human beings are concerned. Forgiving, then mercy. And he gave the analogy of a glass. You know, in Arabic the statement is إِنَّ دَرْءَ الْمَفْسَدَ مُقَدَّمْ عَلَى جَلْبِ الْمَصْلَحَةِ, which means, if you have a dirty glass, and you want to drink, say, juice, what do you have to do first before you can use the glass? Clean out the negative element before you can add the positive element. Forgiveness cleans out the negative element. Mercy is obviously the positive element, right? So, forgiveness comes first, mercy comes second. This is the only place in the whole Qur'an. I'd be very impressed if you know where this is from. Nope. You're right. يَعْلَمُ مَا يَلِجُ فِي الْأَرْضِ is mentioned in Surah Al-Hadid, but this is not it. No one knows? Okay, I'll give you the number, you tell me the name. Surah number 34. Figure it out one day. Very good, Saba. Surah Saba, ayah number 2. 34:2. Okay. This one, if you read the English translation, do you see mention of human beings? Are human beings being mentioned? Not directly. Not directly. If you were to indicate the literal, at the outer meaning of this ayah, the obvious theme of the ayah is the knowledge of God. He knows what goes into the earth, what comes out of the earth, what comes down from the sky, what goes up into the sky. The theme is knowledge. All over the Qur'an, whenever knowledge is mentioned, somewhere in the passage there's also mercy. Knowledge and mercy are affiliated terms in the Qur'an. Because God's knowledge, Allah's knowledge in the end is mercy. The biggest example of that is Ar-Rahman. You know the next one? Allama al-Qur'an. The exceedingly merciful taught the Qur'an. Knowledge, education, right? And there are many other instances. But more than that, if there is no mention of human beings, then why is mercy is understandable because that's universal. Forgiveness is particularly an attribute that affects who? Human beings. If there is no mention of human beings, then there is no need for Ghafur. But there is mention of human beings. It's implied. You know, in the beginning when Allah says He knows what enters into the earth, the farmer thinks of what going into the earth? What's planted into the earth? The seed. And what comes out? A plant. But at a deeper look, we also enter into the earth one day. And we will also be coming out of the earth one day, Day of Judgment. Remember that again. He knows what enters into the earth could refer to plants, but also refers to human beings, because they certainly enter into the earth and they will certainly be coming out. If you look at the next part, he says what comes down from the sky. From a farmer's perspective, what is coming down from the sky? Rain. But from the perspective of revelation, it is the words of Allah, revelation, angels, that are also coming down from the sky. That's mercy. But let me not give you that parallel yet. So revelation comes from the sky. Revelation comes, people decipher it, they act according to it, or they don't act according to it. What goes back up to the sky? Their deeds for evaluation. Let's do that again. Human beings enter the earth, will come out of the earth. Revelation comes down from the sky, and what goes up? Deeds go up to the sky. Now, once again, at the time of death, human beings are in need of Allah's mercy. When they are raised, they will be in need of Allah's forgiveness. On the Day of Judgment, we all need forgiveness. So, mercy first, forgiveness second. What comes down from the sky again? Revelation. Revelation is mercy. What goes up to the sky again? Deeds need what? Forgiveness. Mercy first, forgiveness second. The only place in Qur'an where mercy is first, forgiveness is second. For subhanallah, very accurate use of words, precisely in their place. And these are just small examples of, what happened in the beginning. I'll tell you what happened historically. The subject became such an obsession with Islamic scholars. In the beginning, the papers used to be aqidah-based papers or creed papers and books and doctrines, where they would write saying, this is what proves that this is the word of Allah. And for 2 or 3 centuries, this was the theme. And then the scholars got tired of that theme, saying, we don't need to prove it anymore. Let's just explore its beauty. So the theme became, the theme later on is Jamadul Qur'an rather than I'jazul Qur'an. The beauty of the Qur'an. Let's explore the deeper meanings of the Qur'an. Because it's way too obvious that it's the word of Allah. They didn't even delve into that much anymore after a couple of centuries. So you find most of this discussion really in the context of just exploring the Qur'an's beauty in that subtle capacity. What adds complication to this, however, is the fact that it's not being expanded upon or explained or articulated by the Prophet ﷺ, only by the scholars who are exploring the language later on. Right? And yet his choice of words are always on point because they're not his. They are Allah's words. They're Allah's words. An author has a time to write something and edit it and modify it and edit it and modify it. With the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, with Qur'an, it's memorized as it is, cover to cover. And then there is no editing, modification. This is it. It's just memorized as it is. So this is one, profound example of, I did have forgiving in there. The last thing, I promise. And then I'll let you go home. Is this one really, when I first studied it, I had to turn everything away and I just had to go pray, because this is too much, at least for me. Let me see if I can find it so I can show you what it is. ICNA workshop. I was doing a competition between brothers and sisters at the ICNA convention in Atlanta 2 days ago. Okay. For those of you who read Arabic, for those of you who don't, listen carefully to the Arabic words and see if you find a pattern. Read the first word in red. Zakariya. Next word. Khafiya. Next word. Shaqiyya. Next word. Waliya. Next word. Sharqiyya. Next word. Nabiyya. Then. Hayya. Then. Okay. Those of you who don't speak Arabic, did you notice something? Those of you who don't speak Arabic? Did you notice anything in the way the words sounded? They all did what? They rhymed. There was a rhyme scheme. This is Surah Maryam, Surah number 19, which is like a lot of other surahs in the Qur'an. The words are rhyming at the ends of the verses, or the ayat rather. Okay? ذِكْرُ رَحْمَةِ رَبِّكَ عَبْدَهُ زَكَرِيَّا إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ نِدَاءً خَفِيًّا, etc. And the ayat go on and the words keep rhyming and rhyming and rhyming and rhyming until you come down, and I skipped some ayat in this presentation, but read the next word in red. Yamtaroon. That doesn't rhyme with khafiyya or shaqiyya or, insiyya. None of those words. Now it's got a different rhyme scheme. Yamtaroon, fayakun, mustaqim, azim, mubin, yu'minun, yurja'un. Different rhyme scheme. So you have the first many ayat dedicated to the same rhyme scheme. And then a different rhyme scheme all of a sudden in the same surah. When the subject was the same, the stories of the prophets, the rhyme scheme was the same. As soon as the subject changes, it's kind of like paragraph change. You hit space, then tab bar, move over, the indentation. The Qur'an doesn't have that. What does it have? A different rhyme scheme, because the subject has changed. So the listener can know that now a new subject is being talked about. But what's interesting is, when you want to refer back to the old subject, وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ إِنَّهُ كَانَ صِدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا. Stories of the prophets again. Old rhyme scheme again. A word that is not poetry. It's dealing with a very serious subject. But yet for the listener who listens carefully knows the subject is one because the rhyme scheme is one. And as soon as the rhyme scheme changes, the subject has advanced to something else. And when the rhyme scheme returns, it is because that tangent was necessary to complete the original subject. SubhanAllah. Give me another document that does that consistently throughout the text. Those of you know Surah Naba. عَمَّا يَتَسَاءَلُونَ عَنِ النَّبَإِ الْعَظِيمِ الَّذِي هُمْ فِيهِ مُخْتَلِفُونَ كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ ثُمَّ كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ. One paragraph. أَلَمْ نَجْعَلِ الْأَرْضَ Go on. وَالْجِبَالَ أَوْتَادًا وَخَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا وَجَعَلْنَا نَوْمَكُمْ سُبَاتًا. SubhanAllah. One subject is done, the other subject has its own rhyme scheme. And sometimes you'll have long passages with the same exact rhyme scheme with something interjecting in the middle that doesn't fit the rhyme scheme. You know why? Because that tangent is necessary for the rest of it and you have to pay attention. Allah will say, لا أقسم بيوم القيامة ولا أقسم بالنفس اللوامة يحسب الإنسان أن لن نجمع عظامة بلا قادرين على أن نسوي بنانه بل يريد الإنسان ليفجر أمامه يسأل أيان يوم القيامة. The subject is over. The next one. فإذا برق البصر وخسف القمر وجمع الشمس والقمر يقول الإنسان يومئذ أين المفر كلا لا وزر إلى ربك يومئذ المستقر ينبأ الإنسان يومئذ بما قدم وأخر. The next subject. بل الإنسان على نفسه بصيرة ولو ألقى معاذيرة. You hear the rhymes at the ends? Then a break. Because for the next subject you need to understand something else. لا تحرك به لسانك لتعجل به. And then go back. Subhanallah. So these are some of the linguistic dimensions of the miracle of the Qur'an. The last thing that I want to leave you with, and most of all, the Qur'an is a miracle for the most unscientific reason. Because it transforms lives. To this day, there are people they'll be the last person you would think would be a Muslim. The last person on the face of this earth. One of my best friends in the world, his name is Abdullah, his original name is Mike. He was a neo-Nazi. Tattoos all over his body. He's memorizing Qur'an right now. He was actually he was up there, and he's actually talking to a couple of gangs in New York State prisons, and talking to them about Islam, some of the head leaders of the white supremacist crew, because they're old friends. Last person you would imagine would be a Muslim. And he's one of my best friends, and by the way, he married a black woman, by the way. And yeah. And they have 4 kids. Yeah, subhanAllah. And this man, you know how he became Muslim? He says, one day I had a fight with my mother, I punched her in the head, I got really mad at myself, so I had to find somewhere to go where the cops wouldn't look for me, so I went to the library. And I couldn't find anything, I had to make myself look normal, so I picked up a book and it happened to be the Qur'an. And I wasn't reading it, it was reading me. That's what he says. I wasn't reading it, it was reading me. And he took the Shahada in the library. SubhanAllah. The most weirdest experiences people have. When they read the Qur'an, it just completely transforms their lives. My daughters go to an Islamic kindergarten, preschool. I started it, I was the principal first. But I quit when we found a suitable replacement. The replacement is a woman. She's Japanese. She was born in Japan. She migrated here, and she was a very high-power executive downtown. She used to work on Wall Street. And you know how they have those vendors in Wall Street that sell like shawarmas and stuff like that? We call them chicken guys, right? So she was at one of those, and the guy was blasting like recitation of Qur'an. And she goes, "That's really interesting music. Where do you get that?" And the guy said, "Actually, I can tell you where to go." He pointed her to Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, where she ended up in a store, and they gave her a copy of the Qur'an, and she read it, and she took Shahada the next day, and her 2 sons are memorizing Qur'an, and she's the principal of an Islamic school now, right? The most unlikely people that you would think. No conversion, no preaching, nobody went to them and say, accept this or you're doomed. Nothing. They just went and read the Qur'an. And you know what's the craziest thing? After 9/11, there was a spike in conversions of people that out of curiosity started buying the copy of the Qur'an from Barnes & Noble. And this is not even the miraculous Arabic Qur'an. This is English translation of Qur'an. And people are just out of curiosity, what is this terrorist document? And they're reading it and they're finding, how can I miss this? I just met last week, I was in Atlanta. There was a convention there in Atlanta. And I met a young man, younger than me at least. He was, now get this, his original name is Joshua, now his name is Yusha. He's originally Irish. He was studying Orthodox Christianity, studying to become a scholar. He was studying Hebrew, Aramaic, he was studying the ancient language, Latin even, to study the Bible in its original texts. And he heard a sermon one day about Islam and how it's an evil religion, right? And he thought to himself, after all the Bible I've studied, I can't think the Bible is the truth. But one thing's for sure, of all the other religions I'm going to explore, Islam will never be one of them because it's an evil faith. He wasn't convinced of the Bible. The more he studied it, the less convinced he became. And then finally one day, the funny thing is, he was studying at a church. The wall to the masjid is about a foot apart. He was studying at this place. And he used to park his car in the masjid, at the mosque, and then go to church. For 10 years he was doing this, since he was an early teen. And then one day somebody saw him and said, "Hey, the Friday prayer is going on," because he was going on Friday to church to speak to his priest. And they didn't know that he's not a Muslim, because he's parking in the mosque parking lot. So he said, "Okay, whatever, I'll check it out." He goes in, listens to the sermon, takes Shahada, becomes a Muslim. So this, to me at least in our times, the strangest stories of people in the Western world. People that you would never have imagined coming to Islam. This is probably, to me at least, the greatest miracle of the Qur'an. The most profound miracle of the Qur'an. This is one you can't argue away from anyone, because they've experienced it themselves personally. They've personally experienced it themselves. Last but not least, I pray that anything that I have said was good and true, and that Allah accepts my intentions and your intentions for His cause. And I also pray that any mistakes that are made, first of all, I declare that they're my own, and second of all, I hope that you can all forgive me for my shortcomings, and that Allah also forgives me for them.